So I'm going to start with a bit of a sort of a preface, a sort of a point, is that I often hear people talking about recovery, what is it? Like it's a general thing that is the same for everyone, and I often hear clinicians talking about this need to have stability first, and I'm going to try and include in this lecture of my perspectives of what it is, of things that I hear also in my professional role, on sort of maybe clinical perspectives alongside my perspectives. So I'm going to try and give you as much as possible. So in Australia, we're one of the I think only two in the country's southern hemisphere that actually have personal recovery written into national policy. So personal recovery is officially what we do, except it's not really what we do especially in government services, because our services aren't actually set up that way. That's a really loaded statement. That's probably an hour's lecture in itself. But one of the principles of personal recovery is empowerment, and I'll probably talk a little bit about empowerment a bit further into this. Because our services just come from a very bi-determinist perspective, the options that we're given and treatments, call it what you will, cannot really ultimately offer very much empowerment, because you have to accept these certain diagnostic and social labels and treatments that are on offer, and you can't go outside of that and do personal meaning making. So that's why I got this picture here of these documents. And I guess my main point here is that it's very hard for services to deliver something they can't define. And that sounds like a bit of a stab at services. It's not. What I mean by that, I don't necessarily think that having an overarching definition of personal recovery is necessarily a good thing either, because I think it's fitting that something so personal and nuanced and unique to an individual is probably something you can't put in a box either. But it does lay us open to our services finding it very difficult to deliver this thing called personal recovery. One, we don't really know what it is, it's very individual, and our services really work on sort of boxes and a very particular framework. So that was my first point, and that's sort of an overarching message for this lecture. I personally, as many people with lived experience, have my own framework of understanding. I do prefer the term discovery to recovery. Yeah, I guess one perspective of the word recovery for people like me, because I no longer believe in their illness, I'm going to call it an idea, because actually that's what psychiatry is. It's more of an ideology. There's a great sort of lack of science there. The idea that I'm sick doesn't really align with me, because no one's been able to prove to me that I am with any kind of medical testing, and the science isn't there either, even to develop those tests or even hypothesize some of these chemical-based theories, and that doesn't mean that I'm right and they're wrong, because I can't prove that I'm not sick either. So what we have in mental health is just these perspectives, and some people can see me as sick, and some people don't. What's important for me is what I think. So I love the term discovery, because I think that's what I've spent a long time doing, and recovery I'm not as aligned with, because I didn't recover because I wasn't sick. So that's kind of my framework there. And so for me, what I think I did was re-identify, and I'm hoping to publish my book on this. That's another lecture, but I just wanted to say that that's, for me, what I call my framework of understanding is re-identification. And so this was my first point. I mentioned this point at the beginning, so this is one of the little points I'm going to lace through the lecture. Don't have to be stable to recover. And I constantly hear people going, I think we should get a bit of stability before we try that. And I don't really think that, because I think that there's no time like now. And even I've been in times where I've been in a complete emotional crisis. I'm happy to use the word crisis. Some people don't like it, I don't mind it. I've been in crisis, and that doesn't mean that I'm not capable of starting recovery. It doesn't mean that I have to wait for this stability. What is stability? And some clinicians, I guess, work from the let's get a chemical stability, let's get you eased onto your meds, get you sleeping while doing this. Well, that's fine, but in my mind and my heart, I can still have vision and aspiration. I can still plan and think and feel in my head. And a lot of that internal stuff that no one can see is actually a beginning of recovery. I could be in an absolute, what would they call it, having a real mania, psychotic. I have been off missing for 2 days and shaved my head and been crazy. But actually in that instance, that I'm put into a clinic and put in hospital, even when I'm out of my mind like that, I can still connect with someone and go, it would be nice not to feel like this. I wonder what my dream life would be like. That's the start of recovery. So I'm going to talk about dreaming space later. We don't need to be stable to start. The first thing that I think we need, perhaps I should talk about me, so I can only speak for myself. I just needed hope. So you can't really start anything without hope, because if you don't believe it's going to happen, it probably won't. I'm quite into the theory, sort of like law of attraction, and yeah, I have to find hope first. And I would really need clinicians and anyone that's working with me to help me to hold that hope for me. So hold it for me until I can find it for myself. And I could tell a story here, but in the interest of time I'm not going to. But there are some people that don't have family and friends, or even very involved neighbours, don't have pets, they don't have anything, and all they're going to have is their OT, their social worker, the psychiatrist. They're only going to have their team. And if that team comes with this perspective, or the person is going to infer a tone that they are hopeless and that this might not happen, or that it's going to be this way, they're going to be indefinitely on medication and struggling, then that's very hard in itself to recover from. So yeah, that was me in a few meetings when I heard a clinician once say that someone was not recoverable. So really interesting question before I actually go into what's personal recovery, and this is, I think, a really important point. What do I see myself as recovering from? Because we hear lots of people talking about recovery and what is it and how do you get there and where do you go and how do you do it. And lived experience people are more and more now talking, standing up and talking about this and being invited to talk. But I think sometimes a really important question is, what is it you're recovering from? Because a clinical answer would be, it's schizoaffective disorder. She's recovering from schizoaffective disorder. Yes, I suppose we are, I am, she was, he is. But there's a lot of stuff going on in the world around that, sort of social injustices and things. And in fact, the services themselves can be very traumatizing. So an important question I'm going to run through quite quickly is, I'm often asked, what are you recovering from? So, and I'm asked that in the more sort of progressive spaces where people get that is a really important question. And my answers sometimes surprise people not in those sectors. First of all, not recovering from the experience that had me diagnosed. For me, diagnosis is irrelevant in that context, very relevant in other things because I don't believe in diagnosis, but the so-called illness that people think I have is not the sole thing I'm recovering from. In fact, for me, that's irrelevant. Very relevant in the context that I have a social label for life now. Firstly, I'm actually recovering from this very biodeterminist view of me. I'm recovering, in some cases, from the help that I help, in inverted speech marks for the people listening to the recording, the help I received. I'm recovering from the diagnosis, the social label, this box that I was put in. I'm recovering from the one-size-fits-all approach, clinical understandings of who I am, and side effects of medications. That's my first 4 points. I'm also recovering from society's understandings of who I am as an individual, society's low expectations of me, both personally and professionally, stigma, prejudice, discrimination, living at the poverty line and financial distress, and structural oppression, and social injustice, and all these I could do a 2-hour lecture on themselves. Annalise, get me back. I'm happy to come and do that too. And as I was alluding to at the beginning, this complete and total and utter loss of hope. Those are some of the things that I was recovering from, and still do recover from to some extent now. In recent times, we definitely shifted from clinical recovery being the be-all and end-all and the only offering in recovery, and there was a lot of focus on social recovery, which is a vast improvement. I think I like the socially based ideas. It's definitely an improvement on clinical only, but I think in its own right, by itself, couldn't be a single approach either. And I am quite critical of some recovery models, and I did critique them in America a couple of years ago in a conference. I do think that some perspectives, social recovery can be quite disempowering. And I think I did reference the slide in lecture part 1 very quickly. It's in quite a lot of my PowerPoints, but I do love Harper and Sweet's paper from 2012. This is a very compacted version of a couple of bullet points from that paper. But we can actually individualise social problems. You know, we place the onus on the person. It's you, you're sick. Maybe you should adapt. If the problem is located in you due to sickness, and that just eliminates any adverse experiences we're having in society, which actually add to our distress. And so then the structural causes of distress are obscured. I already gave you this quote here, I believe, in lecture part 1. I do love it. It's only when the collective structural experiences of inequality and injustice are explicitly linked to processes of emotional distress that recovery will be possible. I'm not going to do a lot of talking on these slides. They're really there for you if you do want a copy of the PowerPoint afterwards. They're just sort of models that I think have been very helpful, and they relate to these sort of social recovery perspectives. And I do have a quick slide here on intersectionality, but again, I think that's going off into another lecture. But I'm putting the slides here and I'm mentioning these things is that I was recovering from these emotional experiences I've had. I'm recovering from this whole whirlwind of this whole storm that I've had to live in, and some of that's external to me, but it affects me massive internally and externally. It is a crazy storm to live in the way that I've lived when society, it just doesn't allow for the things that I needed. I'm not as familiar with this Bevan and Fem, and I haven't finished reading a lot of these papers, but I did find this slide quite interesting. But I'm going to keep moving on to moving with my own perspective. So at the point where I finished my part 1 lecture, where I left you with this, I'm going to have ECT, the sort of the cliffhangers we left our part 1 lectures were, no one at that point sort of asked me what I wanted to recover towards and what my best life looked like to me. It was all, let's get you chemically stable, let's do ECT, let's just shock your brain and your body into a better way, and then you'll be a bit stable and you can start recovering. And I just don't think that's just the best conversation around ECT. I mean, obviously there's a lot of conversations about this is what it does, and I got leaflets and stuff, but all of that was very disease model. I don't think there was a lot of transparency from psychiatrists and people that I had asked about whether this was very well evidence, like does it work in the way that we think it works, or is it a fluke? You know, I've since read a lot of things after. But the point of that story was it actually worked really, really well for me. And I'm not convinced it probably worked that well for the reasons that maybe perhaps medical professionals think it worked. But I don't care, because I had a really good experience, and that's what I care about, is it did. I probably shouldn't use the phrase jumpstart me, because that does confuse probably my message. But I did feel like it really, really helped. And I have a suspicion that it probably really, really helped because I had to come off my mood stabilisers to have ECT. Because mood stabilisers are essentially anticonvulsants, so obviously ECT involves convulsions. So I think coming off mood stabilisers that were very much dulling me and keeping me in this able kind of status quo of depression really at that point, because I was on a lot of other things, but I think coming off them to have ECT was probably very helpful. So I'm just adding that bit in now, because I know you're probably all wanting to know from last lecture, what happened to the ECT? I had a phenomenally great reaction. I then started this whole journey that I'm now going to finish my my story about. So I'm recovering towards, this is more the stuff I really wanted to get into, for me, discovery, which is deep self-exploration. So I'm not recovering from an illness, I'm now starting a journey of personal development and exploration. What I wanted, and I think what I've done and still do, is personal evolution. I needed self-awareness, true internal insight, and I needed self-empowerment from self-agency, self-advocacy, and being self-directed. And I've got a term here, I've been reading about this recently, I YouTubed it too, it's where I first found it. Outrospection. Got a quick slide here, I've never included this in a lecture yet, so this is my new slide. This idea, this word, is a term sort of coined by a gentleman called Roman Krasnarek. Hoping I've pronounced it correctly, I'm going to call him Roman from this instance on. And there is a website by a lady where she summarises this very well. It's from a blog. And she says the notion of outrospection implies that we should discover who we are and what it is that we want to do with our lives by looking outside of ourselves, not just at the world but also the lives of others, and thus define our place according to empathy and not egoism. So that's her summary of Roman's work, and I've just put the YouTube, the link there in case anyone does want to go off on YouTube. I'm not going to officially reference his words, but that's the link to his YouTube. And the reason I'm putting that out there is because we talk so much about insight and self-awareness and looking within and this deep internal journey, which I absolutely agree. There's a massive amount of internal stuff, but I think what I've been learning in the later years is that is this outrospection. It's about learning my place comparative to what goes on around me and what others are doing and how these connections relate to me. So it's a bit like outsight, maybe. It's made up a word there, but it sounds good. And this is something I've heard my peer colleague, Curtin, talking about personal potential. So personal capital, knowledge capital, social capital, and resource capital. And in brackets there are the kind of questions that we ask to ascertain what those capitals are that we have. So before I start recovering towards something, I have to do a lot of prep work and consideration about what do I actually have to start with? What don't I have? Questions like that. So for me, the personal evolution ultimately leads me to self-mastery and self-actualization. And a lot of these terms that are in these slides, these last, I think, 3-4 slides, I just don't see I've never seen them in, because I obviously work in statutory services, I've actually never seen them in people's plans. Maybe self-actualization for people who are really trying to individualise their plans that they're doing for their clients, but so much of the stuff that I think is important in personal recovery, like these terms, true internal insight and self-empowerment, outrospection, deep self-exploration, self-agency, and self-mastery, these things that I think we should all really be talking about if we're really doing personal recovery, they're just not templated into these lovely little Word documents that we do in government. So, key message there. And the third thing I think in this process for me was dreaming space, and I'm not going to take lots of time on this slide. Dreaming space is just about where I get to dream about how wonderful things could be and what I'd really like, and that again could be an hour's lecture. So I am bullet pointing a lot of my answers just to give you enough to think about. And for me, when I've dreamed, and when I first dreamed and had dreaming space, I think my step 4 was these things that I call guidance statements. So I wrote a life vision statement, I wrote a personal mission statement, and I wrote a personal power statement. Now, personal power statements are actually something that Dr. Patricia Deegan, this is her baby, personal power statement. statements, and she talks about personal medicine as well. So I didn't know her or that at the time, years ago, when I started this journey, but essentially that's what I did. I made these kind of statements. One of them is still it's on the back of my wardrobe door, so I still see it. So really, really helpful. Again, we don't get to do this stuff when we often come into services because no one wants to sit and dream and write with you, but we really should. Really should. And then, you know, when we come away with this management plan, which is in itself an awful phrase, you know, having a case manager. Like, you're my case now. You're not a person, you're my case. and I'm your manager, because you're clearly doing a terrible job recovering, so I need to manage you. And it's just like the most disempowering term. And, you know, I have heard some clinicians talk about empowerment, and then in the same sentence, like, I've written it into the management plan. I'm like, oh. No understanding of empowerment there, so even in the phrasing we use in government. But it would be lovely to come in and make a plan that's not like this, where you don't walk away with your black and white PDF. It would be lovely to come in and make a scrapbook of all the pictures and things that you dream of that you'd like to do, and all your personal strengths and values, maybe some stuff you see in a magazine, get some highlighters, you know, come out of the scrapbook and leave inspired, like, I'm going to recover, it's going to be my life, this is my plan. We don't get that either, so yeah, so I'm not really sure our service is doing personal recovery, because the document we get is that most people, I go into people's houses all the time as a peer support worker, and I just check, like, where's your plan, what's happening, and they actually can't remember signing it. It's nowhere in their house, so I don't know what they do with it. Step 5, I'm going at a bit of a pace. Can I have a time check?
Well, we can record up until 2:55.
Oh, that's all right. Okay, so I'm halfway.
I don't know if students stay with us, but
yes, all right. I'm gonna power through. Goals. I'm not gonna put goals because you're all the level of students where you really should have heard of things like SMART goals and all that stuff. So I'm a big goal person. Love them. And journaling. Love it. Free writing. Very, very sporadically, and it just suddenly this intangible becomes legible. You know, you can read it, and it's a bit cathartic. So I love that. And volunteer work was a massive part of my recovery. It's not important to everyone, but I think some of the things that you get from it would help a lot of people. Certainly these things that I developed: confidence, sense of contribution, sense of pride, purpose, routine, structure, self-esteem. Those are kind of concepts you would have learned in previous degrees, so I don't think we need to do any more like that. And learning. I think part of recovery is not just feeling and reflecting and doing practical things. There's this massive learning, and I think most people of lived experience would agree with that. So for me, it's really all about discovery. And part of that for me was also idols and mentors. Who do I really admire? An idol could be someone never met, like a celebrity or someone famous from history. And then mentors are the people that I do know, I'm connected with, either friends, family, or professional colleagues, peer colleagues, people I can mentor and actively engage with. And again, you don't see these words in people's support plans. No one asks you any of this stuff in services. That's why I'm trying to be as helpful as possible. It's trying to get you to think, what could I be doing differently that I'm allowed to do, that I can build, that you can build into this, hopefully this passion you're going to come out of here with. And finally, and this is here because it's always this very obvious concept of self-compassion, being self-comforting and self-nurturing. In fact, self-comforting was a term I actually just heard in the last couple of weeks. Probably not for the first time, but in the context, I'm adopting it. I quite like it. I've never used the word self-comforting in, that's another story, but I'm liking that word, so I put that in. In fact, it may have come from one of your letters. Sorry, if that was you, thank you. Your letter assessments. And so, what does recovery or my best life look like to me? These are pretty basic, and I think this is, most people would lean into these things. I'm going to talk about it now because you'll have the slides, and I think which you can probably see on the video. So those basic things. And then for me, I've put my top core values. I've got 10 core values. My top 3 are passion, knowledge and freedom. There's a specific reason why they're always in that order, because I think having passion for anything makes you learn about it and brings you knowledge. If you're passionate about anything, you probably end up learning a lot about it and learning. And I think with knowledge, it's that saying, knowledge is power, becomes some relative freedom. None of us will be completely free, but I think that's why I have them in that order. And that these other things are important to me too. They're on the slide. And a dedication to my career. So there's a lot of people that come into services that they don't necessarily want to go off and get a job or a career. But I think we always have to realise we can't just assume that people are, oh, it's all right, I'll stay on a pension and I'll just have lots of other meaning in my life and I'll do all these amazing, meaningful things, but I don't find my meaning I'm not that interested in a career, and that's fine. And I just don't think we should just assume that people aren't capable of going off and doing master's degrees and having a career and starting up a 6-figure business. I just don't think we should cap people, and so these things are very important to me. Excellence in what I do, strong work ethic, personal development, because obviously in the context of my profession, it's from lived experience. There's a crossover here of personal values, professional values, goals and ambition, and diversity of personal and professional roles and experiences. And look, these things are sort of me. I love skincare, I love mani-pedis, I like kooky hobbies, I like these things, and some other people like these too, so that's me there. I try to eat healthy, doesn't always work, but I like those things. Finding beauty in my world, and I like to live with passion, live with purpose. You could do a whole lecture of sense of purpose, but I decided not to do a big 5-minute on sense of purpose here, because I think that people get that, and I think even that is different for different people, and I think you're getting that already from all the slides and things I've talked about what meaning might make for me. And so for me, it was never about finding a hobby or something fun to do, which is the way I hear a lot of professionals coming at people, like, so I need a hobby that will also use some skill and make them socially engaged. I'm like, yeah, well, some people actually want more than that. Yeah, I didn't need a hobby, and actually, to be honest, I still don't have like a really proper hobby that I do all the time that I could say is really a proper hobby. So I don't have a hobby. I don't even have a massive social life. And people are like, oh, you've not really recovered then. I'm like, yeah, no, but that wasn't what it was for me. So it wasn't about that for me. I've just realised I think that some of my slides were missing, or maybe I'm just misremembering because I'm going through this in a whirlwind. So my message for mental health professionals, and this is a standard slide that I had for a slightly different type of lecture, but it kind of fits everywhere, and it does really fit in OT if you go in government services, statutory services and things. I wanted to say that I think sometimes the harm minimisation approach can actually be harmful, because we can wrap people up in cotton wool, and crutch them along and hope that they don't hurt themselves. And life's not like that, we're going to stuff something up and have a bit of a crisis at some point. And it might be a bit worse for us because we have all this emotional baggage behind us, and it might be a bit more dramatic for us. And it's okay, because we can discover. If we just crutch people along and give them this message that we probably shouldn't take a risk because it's risky and we'll relapse and it could be terrible and you might go to hospital and we'll just stay safe and stable. And I just think that in itself is harmful. It's just not authentic. It's not real. And I think that some clinicians forget their privilege is that you guys got to get an education to start with. Some people like me got our education disrupted because of trauma. I don't have my degree yet. I just started, I haven't done these certain things that many professionals working in mental health already do and have. And you guys get to make mistakes. You might make a bad investment. Oh, I've lost 50 grand, I'm going to go out and get completely drunk and take a day off work and have a mental health day and just be in a bit of a state for a few weeks and have a bad time, and you guys get to do that, Okay, because that's not just like a normal grown-up thing, right? You just make a mess, you might just drink, or you might just go shopping, retail, you know, you do something. And you're allowed to, right? Because you're normal. You get to make those mistakes. Like, I shouldn't turn up for work for a week because that investment went bad. Oh, poor Sandra, totally get why you were drunk on Saturday. Right, as soon as I do it, right, it's a whole other thing, right? And she's having an episode, she's relapsing, it's because she's got schizoaffective disorder. Like, no, sometimes it's just because I did a stupid thing or something just happened to me that's crappy and now I feel this way. But because I have that diagnostic label behind me, it just turns into something different, right? So you guys get to do all these mistakes and nobody bats an eye, and it's fine. So I guess my message is this harm minimization thing is just not, I don't think that helps people grow. And you know, that same said for the risk-averse approach, in some sense is risky because you're risking people's empowerment. And self-empowerment. I'm not going to go into deficit-based approaches too much here. I made some comments on that on the assessments. And ultimately, I felt that in my journey I deserved the dignity of risk, and that's why it's called, I think, the dignity of risk, because in some ways it's not dignity. You don't get to try and live authentically because of this diagnostic category you're in. It's a little insulting, and it is hard sometimes to sit behind a psychiatrist's desk and they're sat there with a Prada handbag and nice Italian shoes telling me that it's a bit risky and I think you should stick with your hobby, and you've got the pension and you've got some meaning and purpose and you've got your hobby and you are quite happy and you're stable, you know, you've recovered. It's just, you know, why ruin it? Because if you have a relapse, oh, it'd be awful. And it's like, well, if it goes wrong, it's okay, because I've already done all this stuff before. So I guess that's one of my final messages, is that we deserve that, and that's what's authentic living, and it's really, really important. There was a side point here that I maybe wanted to end with my definition of empowerment, because I have heard do this in a de-identified way. I did hear a clinician once saying, I empowered someone today and it just felt so good, you know, I empowered someone. And I said, how did you do that then? She said, I gave her she had the 4 recovery choices. I gave her the options and she chose the one that was best for her and she decided, and I'm supporting her. I was like, that's not empowerment. You've got your pre-selected choices from all your categories in this big westernized by determinist system, and these are the options, and you have presented to her this is all you, essentially what we've done is this is all you get, this is all you get. So as long as you choose one, that's your empowerment. Off you go. Do you feel empowered? It's not really very real, because actually empowerment is if the person came in and said, I'm not into your model, I'm actually into Reiki, or I'm into astrology, or actually it's a cultural thing, or I'm having a psycho-spiritual crisis and what I wanted was shaman related. So we don't offer that. So people, and the problem is some people don't realise they're not empowered, and that's a massive part of the empowerment problem. So the only way you can really be empowered is to self-empower, because the power is just something you take, and that sounds really aggressive, but I mean it in just a very basic definition. You take power. The very transaction of asking for and being given some power is a disempowering transaction. It's like a paradox. Trust me, if you're having to ask for some power and you get given some and you walk off with your bit of power that you've been allowed to have, you're not empowered. You need to self-empower, and as long as you're a voluntary patient, this is the other side of this, as long as you're voluntary, you can say, this is my decision, I'm doing this because I believe in it, this is what's happening, and I'd really love you to support me and work collaboratively with me. Or you can just be in opposition, but these are my decisions. And that's self-empowerment. So that's what I believe in. And there are certain reasons why our system just cannot truly offer that. I think this was the ending of my blank slide. If you can reflect on or do any little bits of this in your mental health practice, you will light up our world. I think I'm talking representatively. And so I guess my call to action, I'm just inviting you to reflect on today's lecture. I just put 3 prompt questions to come up with your own. What stood out for you today? What have you learned that's new or different to your previous understanding or perspectives? And what might you carry forward into your professional practice? I really feel like I've missed a chunk, but sometimes that happens in my head when I speed along. I think, oh, the PowerPoint's missing slides and I've missed bits, but when you do a lot of lecturing, don't they, Annalise? Some of your lecture slides from last year goes in your head and you finish going, did I do what I meant to do?
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure I covered everything. At the end of the day, I'm going to make sure you have the full final version of the PowerPoint when you can send them out if people ask for them. If people ask for it. Yeah, and so that was me. That's my references. Legal bit. Have to legally show the references. And if you like my stuff, quick plug, jump on my YouTube channel, please subscribe. And that was it. Thanks guys for having me, and I will give Annalise, as I'm sure Trish probably will, more comments on the assessments if people want more general feedback and stuff. Oh, and what I wanted to say, for anyone who's still logged in live, because we're here in an empty lecture theatre. Oh, 8 people, hi 8 people, don't know who you are, but thanks you 8, the magnificent 8. Wow, staying power, you 8. It was a small class though to start with, so that's actually quite good. It's probably like half of them. Yeah, because we are in an empty lecture theatre because of the corona crisis and we're recording and some people are watching live. I just wanted to say the assessments were just beautiful. So beautiful. Oh, it was just great to mark them. You guys just, you did really, really well. And there were a couple that I read that just, really, really did it for me. And I think that's probably what I need to say. Some of them were really, really just amazing. So thanks guys. That's me, I'm done, it's a wrap.